Okay, we're going to do a small sports topic today. It is Colin Kaepernick and this idiot host, Peter Rosenberg from ESPN Radio. I think he's also on Hot 97 FM from New York City. I don't think he's not on the Breakfast Club show, which I guess is a little better of a show than his is, even though it's still a bunch of hyped up racial nonsense. But Peter Rosenberg is basically a hip hop DJ who has gotten an upgrade to the sports world, maybe because he's able to move between both worlds. He's all about usually the music. But you see, what I want to think now, what I want to say now is that it should then be, because this guy is not a black guy. He's just some Jewish guy. I think he's from the Baltimore or D.C. metro area. I'll look that up. I can't believe that Outlook is still busting my balls right now. But Peter Rosenberg, he's some Jewish guy. And suddenly when he's backing up, just like Max Kellerman, you have a lot of these reporters that they grew up in the most bourgeois circumstances. They've always been intellectually on the left. And they are used by the liberal left. You know, it doesn't matter in the political world. It doesn't matter in the sports world, music. Everything is in order to sustain this liberal skew on everything. And I'm a Jewish person, and I'm here to say if they can do that, if suddenly they're able to comment on topics that are racially sensitive to blacks in order to support these radicals. In this case, Colin Kaepernick, let's say he's a radical. Some would say he's not a radical. I would say he's a facetious, cynical idiot, and that he doesn't really have any political views. It's all fake. So, and I've already discussed this. I discussed this during my interview and question and answer session with Kareem Nafi, who's the Black Lives Matter leader organizer in Cleveland. I've always said that Colin Kaepernick is a cynical prick, and I've hated him before this whole national anthem issue because I hate the 49ers, and now that he's not a 49er, I guess I don't have as much reason to hate him. But look, this is what Rosenberg says. He goes, Friday on ESPN SportsCenter Coast to Coast, ESPN radio co-host Peter Rosenberg said the fact that quarterback Colin Kaepernick remains unsigned in the NFL is shameful and embarrassing for the league as a whole. The bottom line is Colin Kaepernick is not getting a job in this league, not because of the kind of player that he is, but because of his political stance and because of the fact teams don't want to stand next to him. Rosenberg told host Kerry Champion, I think it is shameful and embarrassing for the league as a whole. He later added, this guy is working hard to be in this league and won't get an opportunity, and we have to talk about why that is. And the fact is teams are scared of the backlash they will get if they sign Colin Kaepernick, and I think that is shameful and disappointing. So I had to find this on Breitbart, which I usually don't use because Breitbart is often taken as some sort of people think it's like some sort of Nazi site, even though it's not, and Breitbart actually has some quality articles. But usually I try to find a different source anyway. Even if I find it from Breitbart, I usually go to the source Breitbart finds, which is often regular media. It's not as if Breitbart pulls everything out their asses, but in this case, they took it from ESPN SportsCenter. The audio doesn't work probably because ESPN didn't license them to use it. So I think that it's pretty much a done deal here that Colin Kaepernick, if he plays again in the NFL, there's only a limited number of teams that would even consider having him. It's because of his political stance, and I think that is a legitimate gripe that they would have. I think that the NFL should be more discriminating in terms of issues that they would have it with players. I think that a lot of people that said that, why are they against Colin Kaepernick when they could be against Ray Lewis, who had, the double murder issue, legal problem that it's pretty much hard to doubt now that he was involved in the killing of 2 people. You have Greg Hardy, who was signed by the Cowboys. That was a legit, people who say, well, if you're not going to sign Colin Kaepernick, then why do you sign these degenerates? Well, okay, you have a point there. Ray Rice never got back into the NFL, even though him and his fiance did make up because of the public opposition to it. It would have been a problem. So you're trying to say, you're comparing apples and oranges, first of all. These criminal issues, these problems that players have legally, they're sorted through the players' union anyway. That's why Josh Gordon, for example, who has been suspended over and over again by the NFL for drug-related issues, keeps getting appeal after appeal after appeal. He's not been banned indefinitely from the NFL. There are players who have been. The only player I believe who was officially banned from the NFL, was Art Schlichter, who was a quarterback out of Ohio State, played for the Colts for a few years, and that was because of his gambling issues. And it was probably a good idea that he was not left in the NFL. What was really the problem was that by banning him, the NFL also didn't help him go through any rehab. So this is not a case where anybody's been banned. Colin Kaepernick was never suspended for his issues. It's just that teams do not want this clown on their team. And it's not only because of his political stance. I think it's connected. I think it's also that, look, I believe that he's a fake and a fraud. So I don't really care if he believes in the so-called protest that he did last year. I think it was the biggest joke of all time, and that people actually took him seriously kind of makes it fairly, it reflects on their character that they can believe in this idiot who later went on to praise Fidel Castro, who was one of the most brutal dictators in Latin America for decades, and whose regime is still holding down the freedom of the Cuban people after he left. If Colin Kaepernick has such a problem with American democracy and American society, fine. I mean, I think it's okay. It's okay for him to have a problem with it. But then if he goes and supports the views and actions of somebody like Fidel Castro, I don't see why people should tolerate him. In fact, he got his just desserts in that game against Miami, when he lost the game on a final play where linebacker Kiko Alonso, who is Cuban American, leveled him at the goal line. I remember watching it. So I think that the political part is already part of the conversation, but we're not focusing enough on the performance part, which is that since he went to the Super Bowl a few years ago, he went in 2012, I believe. He took them to the Super Bowl. Colin Kaepernick has become synonymous with a player who has diminished skills. Let's look at his stats here. He played a maximum of 16 games, 2 years. So there's only 2 years where he played the whole season. Those are 2013 and 2014. They were both decent seasons. He went 12-4 and 8-8 in both of those seasons. Switch to the widescreen here. But his QB rating has gone down virtually across the board. I mean, 2016 was not as bad of a year as was 2015. But his rating has been going down. He started out, it was never tremendously high. Okay? One of the reasons that Kaepernick was such a threat, as we're going to talk about soon. Sorry, my mouse is screwing up. One of the reasons he was such a threat at the beginning when he replaced Alex Smith as quarterback in 2012, I believe, was that he was a triple threat, okay? He was somebody who he had a fairly good passing arm. He could run probably among the best in the league. He was this was before Russell Wilson was even known as an elite quarterback. So he was probably known as one of the two best running quarterbacks in the league. The other one being the rookie Robert Griffin III for Washington. So yeah, he had this great physical ability. Okay, the third threat was that he was this bulky, muscular dude. He was hard to take down, and it was almost like he was a faster version of Ben Roethlisberger. But as the seasons wore on, okay, in 2013 they went 12-4 with him starting all the games. Alex Smith was traded. People thought that would be the end of Alex Smith because he'd never been that fantastic of a quarterback under Jim Harbaugh in San Francisco. He'd become, pretty good after having an awful beginning of his career with Mike Singletary, but Harbaugh was considered the person who built the careers of both Smith and Kaepernick in the league. Okay, we should never. I never liked Jim Harbaugh, but you can't argue with the fact that he built two quarterbacks that were not that heavily praised coming out of college. Alex Smith was okay, but he wasn't like some phenomenon coming out of college. He was kind of a bust until Jim Harbaugh came along, and Colin Kaepernick was a second-round pick out of Nevada Reno. So, this guy, he kind of owes his career to the quarterback guru, Jim Harbaugh. And once Harbaugh left, Harbaugh was fired in 2014, after the 2014 season. Okay, you can see that his completion percentage stayed roughly the same, but it had already gone down from earlier. Actually, no, it did improve in 2014. That was still under Harbaugh. There were other, but the QB rating did go down. He was throwing, let me see here. He was throwing more interceptions. Okay, in 2015, he played only 9 games. He threw 5 interceptions. Okay, that's not the best stat. He was taking more sacks as the years went on, just because San Francisco was falling apart as a club. More players were leaving. That was what, the 49ers as a whole were a garbage club after they went to the Super Bowl. They had all these guys, Aldon Smith and whatnot, that were defensive studs, but they were always getting in trouble with the law for domestic violence. Ray McDonald, for example. These guys, they were the people that Mike Singletary used to build the defense into the juggernaut that it was, and under Harbaugh it began to fall apart. And the other person that was really the reason behind it was Frank Gore behind his success. So we're going to listen to this. I can't put it on video because of probably copyright from the NFL, but we'll listen to the audio.
Is he not currently on an NFL roster because of politics or productivity?
Productivity, performance, or whatever P word you want to strap to it. I think that's what it is. I mean, listen, we can talk politics. You know what? I'll go out there and say, hey, it's 5% politics and 95% performance. This is what's the cliche line? Quarterback-driven league, yada, yada, yada. If he could play and play at a high level, that 5% of the politics that comes into this, because, Prime, you and I both know, if we're going to take a stand for something, we got to be willing to suffer the persecution that comes with it. And whether right, wrong, or indifferent, his stand last year probably affected the bottom line of our business, which no owner wants that. But as a head coach, you don't want distractions. You get 16 games to try to make a mark every single year. You can't have anything that's going to deter from so-called the greater good of the team. Now, let me get back to the performance.
It's a horrible quarterback. So you saying he's the 33rd best quarterback in the league, which is saying he can't start in the NFL?
I'm saying this. I'm saying since 2013, the Baltimore playoff run, the performance has been on a steady decline. And who can offer him
the whole team? The whole team has been on a steady decline.
Right. So let me ask you this. Who can offer him the best run game in football and the best defense in football? Because when he was so-called elite, that's what he had. all his warts, all his bumps, all the negative part of his game that he can't see the field to save his life were covered up by this guy named Frank Gore and Justin Smith, and then Patrick and all the other boys on the defensive side of the ball.
So, okay, you heard it there. That was Heath Evans. I think he played for the Saints. And it's a legitimate point, okay? This whole idea that the politics is a problem is true, even though I believe that his politics are about as genuine as, Cheese Whiz or something. I think Colin Kaepernick's political issues are secondary to his on-the-field issues because, look, he's been through 3 coaches in San Francisco, and he's out of San Francisco now. Now, I'm not going to blame the entire downfall of the team on him, but like Evans said, one of the reasons that the Niners were so successful under Harbaugh was not just because he was good at developing quarterbacks. He also did hold the defense together for a while. I think that he eventually lost control of them. And also Frank Gore, people forget, Frank Gore, I think, is still playing. He's one of the longest standing and most productive running backs in the NFL. I think he plays for the Colts still. He left, I believe, 2 seasons ago from the 49ers. And, Colin Kaepernick had a great team that he basically inherited from Alex Smith and from basically what Harbaugh and Singletary built. And he didn't have to start from nothing. If you want to compare him to a quarterback that starts from nothing, you have to go to Jamarcus Russell, for example. He started out in Oakland. Horrible situation. A team that had basically turned into garbage. And it was very quickly learned that Jamarcus Russell was not going to really change that. You could go to Detroit, where Matt Stafford, he inherited a team that was the worst team by record in NFL history. They'd gone 0-16 the season before. You could go to Mark Sanchez, inherited a pretty piss-poor team in New York when what's his name? Eric Mangini was fired. They had to bring in Rex Ryan, okay? And Rex Ryan and Mark Sanchez were able to build a respectable team for a while until it was gradually revealed that there was nothing there besides Sanchez and Darrelle Revis and a couple other decent players on the defensive side. But if we're talking about a great quarterback, it's not enough. It's not enough. I want to emphasize it. It's not enough to make it to the Super Bowl like Colin Kaepernick did. Colin Kaepernick made it to the Super Bowl having inherited a team from Alex Smith, okay? There are a lot of players, and you want to talk about racially, you want to talk about a player that made it to the Super Bowl having built the team, gone shoulder to shoulder with them the whole way, and that's a black quarterback. You have to talk about Doug Williams, okay, who was in an adverse situation during a strike year. You have to talk about Donovan McNabb, who made it to a Super Bowl. His team was undoubtedly built around him, and he took them to the NFC Championship game year after year. He never won the game because he's with the Eagles. But you have to throw in those guys. Russell Wilson was one of the pieces that brought the Seattle Seahawks to the top. And Colin Kaepernick is simply not in the same category whatsoever with any of those guys. And those are just the black quarterbacks, okay? Because everybody makes this a racial issue. There are tons of quarterbacks that have inherited good teams, and they're simply not, all-time greats. They just make it to the Super Bowl and sometimes just win it, sometimes not. Look at all the mediocre quarterbacks that have made it to the Super Bowl or even won it. You have Rex Grossman. 2005 with the Bears. The guy was a non-factor. He was not even, I think the next year he wasn't even playing for the Bears. There's Neil O'Donnell took the Steelers to the Super Bowl in 1996 and was a total disaster in the game. He's the reason that they lost. One of the other reasons was that the rest of their offense wasn't that good either. But he's the reason that they lost the game pretty early. because he was just throwing interceptions that were pop outs in the outfield. Who else? There's Trent Dilfer, won a Super Bowl with Baltimore, had one of the greatest defenses of all time. Jim McMahon won a Super Bowl with the Bears, one of the greatest defenses of all time. Peyton Manning won one Super Bowl when he was at his prime with Indianapolis a couple years ago. He won a Super Bowl when he was pretty much at the end of his career, and the defense carried them all the way. And he was, at that point, a game manager. And he was, his main responsibility was to score if possible, but also to prevent turnovers, which he did fantastically. I think, you know, we have to be realistic about players and their skill levels. And Colin Kaepernick is, today, I think he's got to be considered one of these quarterbacks that was a one-and-done guy. Okay, there's plenty. Look, Doug Flutie had an awful career in terms of prospects, where he had to prove himself again and again that he was worthy to even play in the league because he was short and he had virtually nobody was confident that he could see over the offensive line, and he played with team after team, and he would take them to the playoffs in many cases, and you know, that is somebody who defied expectations, okay? And diminished skills was never part of the issue. He was just a guy who had the tenacity to win. Drew Brees was also one of those short quarterbacks with the Chargers. He had a chance to make it big with the Chargers early in his career. It didn't really catch. I mean, he had good statistics. Eventually they decided, you know, we'll move on. We'll go with Phillip Rivers. He had a retread year with with San Diego, with New Orleans. And after that, Drew Brees became one of the greatest quarterbacks of our time. I don't know about all time, but statistically, he's one of the greatest players of all time. He's going to go to the Hall of Fame. There's no doubt about, in my mind, that Drew Brees, with the career he has, is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But Colin Kaepernick, you know, has been consistently, you know, either decent, where his flaws are concealed by other players, or he's just been, you know, a mediocre quarterback. Last year, he went 1-10 in the in the NFC West. Okay, now some would say, you know, you're being unfair. He played in a very tough division. That's an excuse I hear all the time in Cleveland, that Cleveland is a tough division. You know, that's why I prefer to root for the team I've always rooted for, Dallas. But let's segue there. What teams do I think should pick up Colin Kaepernick? Look, Rosenberg is a Washington Redskins fan. Let's see if Mr. Political, Colin Kaepernick, will play for a team that's got the most racist nickname in sports. Let me propose that one. Who else? You have, I think he could play as a backup in Detroit. You know, because as much as I think Matt Stafford is a disappointment and a loser, I think that Colin Kaepernick would probably boost his career, because nobody would want to see Colin Kaepernick come on the field in Detroit, except maybe for some of the Louis Farrakhan followers in the Detroit community. Let's see, who else is there. There's the Philadelphia Eagles. I'd love to see him just get booed like crazy by the worst fans in football. And then, yeah, I think if he were to play here in Cleveland, you know, you'd finally see people not show up. They'd burn their season tickets. They'd finally say, enough is enough. We've taken enough insults from the owner here. And I've seen, you know, people just keep buying the tickets here, even though the team gives virtually no return, and they're getting screwed by the taxes here in order to build a stadium. That's not a spoon clink, by the way. This is a fork over here. For those of you that are following the person I'm talking about. So anyway, Colin Kaepernick, bottom line, this Peter Rosenberg is full of shit. There's no reason anybody should sign him, except if they are really, really desperate. I guarantee you he's not going to get signed in Miami or in Dallas or even in Buffalo. Actually, you know what? Buffalo would be a good target city for him. But you know, Dallas, Miami, all those cities where he's already insulted the fans enough, they're not going to want him. Okay. In fact, Arizona signed his former starter with San Francisco, the guy that took his job, Blaine Gabbert. They took him. He could go play in Oakland, you know, while they're basically, I think they're not going to do that well this year, unless they're really trying to give a good farewell season for the city of Oakland. I think, you know, they could have him there. They could have him sit on the bench behind Derek Carr. I don't think he's going to be a starter again, because no team wants this idiot who dragged down the careers of basically 3 coaches. You have Harbaugh, you have Tom Sula, who was, I think, kind of like the substitute teacher, and then you have Chip Kelly. He basically ruined Chip Kelly's prospects in the NFL forever, going 2-14 that season, with Kaepernick winning 1 game. The other game was won by Gabbert. Both of the games were against another train wreck team, the LA Rams. So anyway, that's it for today. Sports topic. Maybe we'll talk about something later again today. I don't know yet. This is Ramon, Bold Like a Leopard. And have a great Mother's Day, and we'll see you later.